The galaxy had long dismissed humanity as a curiosity, a species so new to the stars that their existence barely registered on the radar of the galactic powers. For centuries, humans had quietly built colonies and established trade routes, avoiding the notice of the more advanced and ancient species who ruled the galaxy. The Elzarians, a race of tall, ancient beings with a mastery over energy manipulation, held dominion over vast swathes of the galaxy, while the Kravorians, brutal, war-driven conquerors, dominated the frontier systems. The humans were seen as little more than a fledgling species, struggling to survive in a universe that had no need for them. Then came the day humans broke. It started as a routine military exercise, a fleet maneuver led by Admiral Samantha Pierce, humanity's brightest tactical mind. The mission was simple: intercept a Kravorian scout ship and make a demonstration of strength. But as the battle began, something unexpected happened. The Kravorian ship, a heavily armored war vessel designed for maximum destruction, was utterly outclassed by the human fleet's quick-thinking strategy. The Kravorian captain, Threx, had underestimated the humans. He thought their ships were too small, their firepower too weak. The battle was over in minutes, using unorthodox tactics, baiting the enemy into a trap and exploiting weaknesses in their ship's navigation system. The humans disabled the Kravorian vessel with minimal casualties. The scout ship was crippled, its crew forced to surrender. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The Kravorians were furious. A race built on honor and violence could not accept such a defeat at the hands of a species they considered primitive. Within hours, the Kravorian High Command had mobilized their fleet, ready for retribution. A single battle had turned the humans into a target, and the galactic powers, who had long ignored humanity, finally began to take notice. Admiral Pierce, sitting on her flagship Vigilant, gazed out at the stars, knowing this victory would not go unnoticed. Her tactical brilliance had earned humanity its first real victory in space, but it had also drawn the attention of the galaxy's predators. There would be no more peace, no more quiet expansion. The galaxy's powers would come for them, to either crush or co-opt this upstart species. But Pierce had a different plan. She didn't need to survive the galaxy's wrath. She would make humanity impossible to ignore. The Kravorian retaliation was swift and merciless. Within days, the first wave of their war fleet descended upon human colonies at the edge of the frontier, places like Arcadia and Ganymede Station, once considered secure. Now, those worlds were battlegrounds. Admiral Samantha Pierce, having narrowly escaped the Kravorian ambush at the Battle of Sentinel's Gate, knew the galaxy would never again look at humanity the same way. Their unexpected victory had caused a ripple, one that was swiftly turning into a wave. But this wave carried danger. The galaxy's elder races, particularly the Elzarians, had long viewed humanity's rise with quiet disdain. A species with no ancient history, no advanced technology to speak of, was suddenly flexing muscles they didn't fully understand. The elites of the galaxy couldn't tolerate it. The Elzarians, calculating and aloof, convened a summit to discuss humanity's rapid expansion. Their cold, violet eyes glowed with an unsettling, unnatural light as they deliberated. For the first time in centuries, they feared something new, something unpredictable. They decided humanity would either bend to their will or be crushed before it became a true threat. As Pierce received reports of mounting Kravorian attacks on human colonies, she understood what had to happen next. The stakes had changed. This wasn't a mere skirmish anymore. Humanity was at war for its survival. And the universe was watching. On a small transport ship, Captain Ethan Hayes and his crew scrambled to prepare for their most dangerous mission yet. A Kravorian fleet was headed directly for Ganymede Station, a heavily populated human outpost. The station's defense capabilities were no match for the Kravorian juggernaut. Hayes' mission: buy time. Once we're there, Hayes said, his voice firm and low, we don't just fight. We have to cripple their supply lines, slow them down long enough for reinforcements to arrive. His crew nodded, grim but resolute. They knew what this meant. The Kravorians were coming in force, and Hayes' ship, the Tempest, was the last line of defense. The Tempest wasn't a warship. It was a converted freighter with barely any offensive capabilities. But Captain Hayes, with his knack for improvisation, had turned it into a predator, outfitted with stolen Kravorian tech and human ingenuity. But even Hayes wasn't sure how long they could hold out. The Kravorian fleet was large, well over 24 ships, each brimming with firepower. As they approached Ganymede Station, Hayes' communications officer, Riley Winters, picked up an encrypted message from an unknown source. A human voice cut through the static. "We're with you, Captain. Humanity stands together." Hayes clenched his jaw, a mix of fear and hope swirling inside him. The message was from the human resistance forces scattered across the galaxy, from planets far beyond Ganymede. It was a signal of solidarity, and perhaps the first true sign that humanity was no longer alone in this war. The real fight was just beginning, and the galaxy was about to learn that humanity would not be easy prey. The battle for Ganymede Station was a brutal affair. Despite their makeshift defenses, the Tempest and its crew fought valiantly, hitting the Kravorian warships with unexpected precision. Hayes led the charge, using the ship's limited firepower in creative ways, luring enemy vessels into narrow asteroid belts, setting traps with debris fields, and launching sneak attacks from hidden corners of the station. But the numbers were against them. For every Kravorian ship they destroyed, 2 more arrived. As the human forces fought tooth and nail to keep Ganymede from falling, news from the front line began to worsen. The Kravorians had broken through the first line of defenses on Arcadia, and a large-scale assault was already underway at Palace Station, one of humanity's most crucial industrial hubs. The Kravorians weren't just invading, they were annihilating. Whole cities were gone in hours, leaving nothing behind but the burning remnants of human civilization. On the Tempest, Hayes knew that holding out any longer was impossible. He sent a final message to Admiral Pierce. "We bought you some time. Now get Ganymede reinforcements here, or we're done." He cut the transmission, knowing that even if they were to succeed, the cost would be high. As Ganymede Station began to crumble under the weight of the Kravorian assault, Hayes had a stark realization. Humanity had underestimated the scale of the war. They had only seen the tip of the iceberg. The Kravorians were only the first to strike, and now every major power in the galaxy would take their turn. Back at Human Command, Admiral Pierce was grappling with a similar reality. The initial success of the Tempest had bought humanity a brief moment of respite, but the price was steep. The Kravorian fleet was stronger than anticipated, and the alien races, those who had watched humanity's rise with growing unease, were preparing to unite against them. The Galactic Council was already mobilizing its forces. Pierce gathered her senior officers in a war room deep inside the Vigilant, the flagship of humanity's newly formed resistance fleet. The room was silent, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. A single defeat could have spelled the end for humanity's fledgling rebellion, but Pierce was not ready to surrender. Humanity was never meant to be just a bystander in this galaxy, Pierce said, her voice cold with determination. "And we will not be erased." The words cut through the tension in the room. There was no choice but to fight, to survive. But something had changed in Pierce's resolve. The galaxy was vast, and its powers were many, but humanity had one thing no one else could claim: the will to fight when all seemed lost. And that, she believed, was the key to winning this war. The galaxy's response to humanity's resistance was swift and brutal. Within a few weeks, the combined fleets of the Elzarians and Kravorians launched a series of coordinated strikes across human-held systems. Their purpose was clear: cripple humanity's infrastructure, break their morale, and force them to surrender before they could become a real threat. Yet despite the relentless assaults, something unexpected happened. Humanity, far from crumbling under the pressure, began to adapt, faster than anyone could have anticipated. The first signs came when a human reconnaissance ship, the Courageous, ventured deep into Elzarian space, and came back with vital intelligence. The Elzarians had always prided themselves on their mental and emotional control, their ability to remain composed in the face of any threat. But humans, it seemed, had something that set them apart. It wasn't just their tactical ingenuity or their advanced technology. It was their ability to think differently in the heat of battle, to outsmart their enemies not with superior firepower, but with the unexpected. The courageous crew had managed to outwit an entire Elzarian fleet by exploiting the emotional and psychological cracks in the enemy's command structure. It was the kind of thinking that no other species could replicate. Humans could think outside of the box, because their emotions didn't just govern their decisions, they shaped them in ways no other species could understand. Admiral Pierce knew the truth before anyone else. Humanity's greatest weapon was not its fleet, its weapons, or its technology. It was something far deeper. It was their adaptability, their ability to evolve, to grow in the heat of combat, to learn from their mistakes, and turn them into strengths. But this realization was not without its dangers. General Ethan Hayes, now a key figure in humanity's military leadership, gathered his officers in a secure war room on the Vigilant to discuss the potential of this newfound power. The revelation had sent shockwaves through the resistance. It was clear that humanity had tapped into something ancient and powerful, a latent ability buried deep within their genetic makeup. The Elzarians have spent millennia perfecting their control over energy, Hayes said, pacing the room. The Kravorians have mastered tactics built on sheer violence. But we've unlocked something they can't understand, something they'll never be able to control. Max Chandler, a brilliant human scientist and one of the key figures behind the genetic research, had made a staggering discovery. Humanity's DNA contained the code for an ancient form of evolutionary adaptability, something that could alter their biology and minds in response to external pressures. This was no random mutation. It was something far more deliberate. The ancestors of humanity had hidden it within their genes, waiting for the right moment to awaken. "We're not just fighting to survive anymore," Chandler said, voice low. "We're fighting to reclaim what was once ours." The implications were terrifying. As humanity began to unlock its genetic potential, the question became not just about surviving the war, but about how far humanity would go to win it. Some feared it might lead to uncontrollable mutations, while others saw it as the key to securing their future. No matter the risks, humanity had no choice but to proceed. The galaxy had underestimated them, but humanity would not make the same mistake again. Humanity's transformation was no longer theoretical. With the activation of ancient genetic pathways, humans began to exhibit extraordinary abilities, enhanced strength, faster reflexes, and even strange mental faculties that bent the laws of physics. Some soldiers on the front lines reported premonitions of enemy moves, while others discovered they could manipulate small amounts of energy with their minds. These powers were unpredictable and often unstable, but they were undeniably powerful. At first, the changes were seen as a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of war. But as more humans began to exhibit these mutations, the entire nature of the conflict shifted. What had started as a war for survival was rapidly becoming a war for control over humanity's future. Admiral Pierce was quick to seize on the advantage. Her flagship, the Vigilant, became a testing ground for the new human capabilities. One by one, soldiers and officers volunteered for experimentation, eager to unlock their potential and make a decisive impact on the battlefield. But as the transformation spread, questions about the ethical consequences of these changes began to arise. "What happens when we've evolved too far?" General Hayes asked, his face grim as he reviewed reports from the front. "What happens when humanity becomes something else entirely?" The war, which had once been a fight for survival, was now a race against time to harness the full potential of humanity's genetic evolution before it overwhelmed them. Those who underwent the transformations quickly learned that their enhanced abilities came with a cost: physical and mental instability. Some soldiers grew stronger, but others became dangerously erratic, losing themselves in violent rages or developing crippling headaches. Yet despite the risks, humanity's armies began to dominate the battlefield. The Kravorians, who had once seen themselves as the undisputed masters of war, now found themselves on the defensive. Their fleets were no longer able to predict the humans' tactics. Their soldiers were no longer certain of their superiority. Humanity's ability to adapt in the heat of battle had evolved far beyond their expectations. In a particularly savage engagement at the edge of the Alara Nebula, a group of human warriors led by Captain Hayes launched a surprise assault on a Kravorian fleet twice their size. The battle unfolded like a dance of shadows and light, as humans, now enhanced by their genetic potential, used speed, cunning, and sheer unpredictability to tear through the Kravorian lines. Even Hayes himself had changed, his once steady mind now sharpened with an almost preternatural ability to predict enemy moves. "Just stay with me," Hayes shouted to his crew as they prepared for the final push. "We break them here, and the war will turn. We'll make them fear us." The Kravorian fleet fell, broken and disarrayed. For the first time, it was clear to everyone. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to win. But as the human forces cheered their victory, Admiral Pierce knew the truth. The more they tapped into their genetic potential, the more they risked becoming something unrecognizable. They were reshaping not just the war, but themselves. And she feared that in the end, they might lose everything that made them human. The victory at the Alara Nebula had shifted the momentum of the war, but it also marked the beginning of a dangerous new phase. Humanity had grown stronger, faster, and more unpredictable with each battle, but the question remained, at what cost? The Kravorian defeat sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The Elzarians, their ancient allies, and sometimes rivals, could no longer afford to remain passive observers. A joint strike force, with the combined might of the Elzarian and Kravorian fleets, launched a full-scale assault on Earth, humanity's homeworld. It was not just a symbolic target. It was the heart of the rebellion, the source of all human strength, and the cradle of their sudden rise to power. In a move designed to shatter human morale, the Elzarians activated their most devastating weapon, a subspace disruption field that would cripple all human communication and navigation systems. Earth would be isolated, cut off from the rest of humanity's scattered colonies. This would be the final blow, the moment when humanity would be forced to surrender. Admiral Pierce, stationed aboard the Vigilant, watched as the fleet's sensors lit up with incoming threats. The breach was imminent. "We don't have time for reinforcements," she muttered to herself. "It's now or never." She knew they couldn't fight the combined fleets head-on, not without the risk of losing Earth entirely. The only chance they had was to sever the Elzarian forces from the Kravorian fleet, isolate the enemy, and hit them where they were weakest. And there was only one place to do that. "The Citadel," Pierce said aloud, her mind already working through the strategy. The Citadel was a legend, a long-forgotten space station buried deep within the Elzarian capital system. It was believed to be a remnant of an ancient civilization, a structure with power beyond the understanding of modern science. There were whispers that it contained technology capable of controlling the very fabric of space itself, an artifact of immeasurable value, one that could reshape the course of the war. "Get me a line to Captain Hayes," Pierce ordered, her voice cold with determination. Hayes was already in motion. The Tempest had been retrofitted with newly discovered technologies and experimental enhancements, making it humanity's only hope for infiltrating the heart of the Elzarian fleet. In a final act of defiance, the human fleet would send their most capable, if most unlikely, crew deep into enemy territory, to breach the Citadel, and seize control of whatever power lay within. "We'll take it, Admiral," Hayes replied firmly. "You'll have the Citadel, and you'll have Earth." As Hayes and his crew prepared to make their move, Pierce gathered her forces. There was no turning back now. If they succeeded, humanity could control its own future. If they failed, Earth would fall, and the war would be lost. The breach had begun. The Citadel was humanity's last hope. But would it be their salvation or their undoing? The Tempest slipped silently through the void, a lone spearhead cutting through a storm of Elzarian and Kravorian ships. Captain Hayes stood at the helm, his eyes locked on the dark expanse of space ahead. The Elzarian fleet was vast, its ships radiating a quiet, cold power. But Hayes wasn't focused on them. He was focused on the Citadel, the prize that would change everything. Behind him, the rest of his crew was preparing for what could be a one-way mission. Lieutenant Riley Winters, now a seasoned commander in her own right, checked her weapons systems, her face set in a mask of calm concentration. Max Chandler, the brilliant scientist who had uncovered humanity's genetic potential, was running diagnostics on the experimental technology they had scavenged from the wreckage of Kravorian and Elzarian ships. The Tempest was their best hope, but it wasn't exactly built for stealth. "We have to hit the Citadel fast," Hayes said, his voice low. "We breach, we take control of the station's mainframe, and we disable the subspace disruptor. Then we get out." "Assuming we get in," Riley replied, glancing at the readout. "Elzarian ships are surrounding it like a fortress. We're talking about a facility that has been guarded for millennia." "We don't have a choice," Hayes said, steeling himself. "We take it, or Earth falls." The Citadel loomed ahead, a massive construct suspended in the heart of Elzarian space. It was a relic, older than any civilization in the galaxy, its surface covered in strange symbols and patterns that no one had ever been able to decode. Even the Elzarians, in all their millennia of knowledge, had never fully unlocked its secrets. But they feared it, and that fear had kept it hidden, shrouded in layers of impenetrable defenses. Hayes gave the order, and the Tempest dove into the darkness, weaving between asteroids and debris fields, doing its best to stay under the radar. But the Elzarian ships were no fools. As the Tempest neared the Citadel, their defenses sprang to life. Laser grids, ion storms, and electromagnetic pulses. The very fabric of space seemed to warp in response to their intrusion. "We're not getting in unnoticed," Max Chandler muttered, hands flying over the controls. "Hold on tight." The ship bucked and shuddered as it was struck by a series of violent energy blasts, rattling everyone inside. Riley clung to her seat, but her eyes never left the tactical display. "Shields are holding. Barely. We've got seconds before they detect us." "I'll take the shot," Hayes said, his voice colder than the void outside. "We breach now." With a sudden, explosive jolt, the Tempest broke through the last line of defenses, crashing through a massive force field. They had made it inside. But now, the real challenge began. "Prep for boarding," Hayes ordered. "This is our only shot." As the Tempest shuddered to a halt inside the Citadel's colossal docking bay, the crew knew what had to be done. They weren't just fighting to win a battle. They were fighting for the future of their species. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested in their hands. The doors of the Tempest hissed open, revealing the cold, sterile interior of the Citadel's docking bay. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's damaged systems. The crew of the Tempest didn't waste a second. They quickly geared up, weapons at the ready, as they filed out of the ship and into the unknown. "This is it," Captain Hayes muttered, scanning the vast chamber ahead. The Citadel was like nothing they had ever seen, an ancient, sprawling structure made of smooth, obsidian-like material, its walls adorned with symbols and hieroglyphs that seemed to pulse with an eerie light. It was both alien and familiar, as though it had been waiting for them for eons. "Stay sharp," Riley Winters said, checking her sidearm. "We don't know what's waiting for us." Max Chandler, carrying a portable data terminal, followed closely behind. His eyes darted over the strange architecture, the gears in his mind turning as he analyzed every detail. "We need to find the central control room. If we can access it, we can disable the subspace disruptor and broadcast a signal to the fleet, and stop the Elzarians from turning Earth into a prison," Hayes added. Let's move. They advanced, moving cautiously through the darkened corridors. The citadel was unnervingly quiet, too quiet. There were no guards, no security systems, nothing to suggest they were being watched. It was as if the place had been abandoned. Yet Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that they were being observed by something far older, something that had existed long before the Elzarians. The further they went, the stranger the architecture became. The walls shimmered, shifting in ways that defied logic. Riley was the first to notice something moving, shadowy figures, flitting at the edges of her vision. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her pulse quickening. Before anyone could answer, the shadows coalesced into a figure. It was humanoid, but its features were obscured by a dark, shimmering cloak that seemed to distort the light around it. The being stood motionless, watching them. Hayes raised his weapon, but Max held out a hand to stop him. "Wait," he said, his voice barely a breath. "This is it, the heart of the Citadel. The power here is alive." The figure spoke then, its voice not in words but in the minds of all of them. "You are not meant to be here," it said, its tone deep, ancient, and filled with warning. "But you will come anyway, because you have no choice. You, too, have awakened." "What does that mean?" Hayes asked, his voice a low growl. "It means," the figure replied, "that the war you fight, the power you seek, is not yours to wield. Humanity is not a creature of this galaxy. You are an anomaly, and anomalies must be corrected." The citadel trembled, its walls vibrating as if responding to the presence of the humans. Hayes felt a deep primal fear creeping up his spine. They had come to conquer the citadel, to control its power. But now, they were faced with something far more dangerous, a force that had been lying dormant for millennia, watching and waiting. The reckoning had begun.